Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Beneath the Silence, Healing the Wounds of Betrayal Trauma. I'm Sandy Joy, your host, and I'm issuing a warm welcome to all of those of you who are watching or listening to the podcast today. Thank you for being here. Thank you for hearing me out, and I really appreciate you. I also want to remind everyone that I don't edit these podcasts, that I like them to be real, raw, and vulnerable, because that's what being a human being is. And if I can't be vulnerable with you, you may feel that you might not be able to be vulnerable with anyone else. And that's how we get our stories out. That's how we get beneath the silence, is by being vulnerable. And it's also to show that it's real life. We're not perfect, and I may make mistakes and likely will. And that's okay. That's part of being human. Today's topic is, as promised, it is on the self-respect and self-acceptance, and how they are impacted by betrayal trauma. And it's something that we don't often talk about and often misunderstood, especially after betrayal trauma, when we're really second guessing who we are and all that goes with it, that internalization piece and so on. And it's when betrayal trauma happens, something very quiet but very profound can occur. And this is where we start to question our worth, our value, our place in the world, and where we feel not good enough, that we're too much. And when I say, not enough, just not enough in any way, shape, or form. Um, and also that, maybe we've been told that, you know, we're to blame or have mental illness or that we're too sensitive, that we take things too seriously. Um, those are all part of things that erode our acceptance of self and our self-respect. And if you have felt at some point any of these things, this podcast is for you. Um, these are not truths. These things that about not being good enough, not or being too much, etc. They're not truths about who you are. You get to decide who you are. And these are reflections, however, of what you've been through, what you have experienced. So today I'm going to explore what self-respect is and isn't, what self-acceptance is and isn't, how these are impacted by betrayal trauma, and then how do we go about rebuilding them. So let's take some deep breaths. I always do three: in through the nose, hold, and out through the mouth. So, and one more. And let's begin. So, what is self-respect? Self-respect is how you honor yourself, how you engage with yourself, what you do for you. How do you recognize your self-worth? How do you honor your needs and your wants as well? It's about setting boundaries. It's choosing what aligns with your values, your ethics, your moral compass. What it is not, it's not about being perfect, because that doesn't exist. It's not about being rigid or controlling, although others, especially the perpetrator of your trauma, may see self-respect as you being rigid or controlling, but that's their issue. That's not really what it is at all. Self-respect is not about never making mistakes, because we're human. We do. And if we've learned from them, I call them learning experiences rather than mistakes. And it's not about putting yourself above others, although And because when we say above others, we're meaning in a more selfish or narcissistic way, but you can prioritize yourself because when you fill your cup, when you look after yourself and respect yourself, accept yourself, then we don't need that external validation from other people. But when you are taking care of you and prioritizing yourself, that's important to do because that's how we gain health, mental health, emotional health, physical health. And when we're healthy, we're able to help other people so much more. Okay? But we have to take care of ourselves first. So it's like in the airplane, the oxygen mask, we have to put that on first. So self-respect is about saying, I matter. My needs matter. My wants matter. My value matters. My values matter. And my safety matters. Okay. So, what is self acceptance then? Self acceptance is how we relate to ourselves. So, what it is, it's allowing yourself to be human and giving yourself grace when we make decisions that 5 minutes, 5 weeks, 5 months, 5 years down the road, we may look at and go, I wouldn't make the same mistake. And giving self grace and self compassion is not saying, well, that was a dumbass move. It's about saying, you know what, I have new learning. And even if that's new learning 5 minutes later, and remember what I always say is the more we know, the more that knowing grows. And this is about giving yourself grace and it's building self up rather than beating self down. So self-acceptance is always it's also about accepting your emotions, and we all have emotions. Sometimes we numb them in betrayal trauma when it's so incredibly painful that we don't feel that pain, but we don't feel happiness as either in any way, shape, or form when we numb. So it's recognizing our imperfections without shame, that their imperfections are what makes us human. Okay. What self-acceptance isn't, it's not about giving up on growth. It's not excusing harmful behavior or ignoring accountability. Okay. So self-acceptance says, I'm allowed to be who I am, even as I grow and change. And we're continually growing and changing. Do some people stay stuck? Yes. And I've just said that before, described it before in other podcasts. But yes, we can stay stuck. So, how does betrayal trauma impact, you know, both self-respect and self-acceptance? So first, we're going to go with self-acceptance, okay? So we may judge ourselves harshly because our whole reality is fragmented. So we feel shame. We reject parts of self, thinking that we must be to blame. Something we did cause the betrayal. That we tend to, and that's that internalization. We may believe that we did something to cause it, something that, there must be something wrong with me. How can someone who purports to love me or thinks I'm a good employee or whatever the case may be, do this? So it must be something I'm doing or the way I am. It's saying things like, what's wrong with me? It's things like, no one likes me. No one talks to me, no one comes to me, no one, whatever the case may be. And there's shame in that. And it's saying in that shame, it's I'm the problem. Whereas in self-respect, the impact may be that we stay in unsafe situations. And then the self-acceptance part, we judge ourselves harshly for staying. I stayed for 10 months, and that 10 months was so I could focus on my healing journey, working with my therapist, sometimes twice a week, for whatever I needed. and not having to worry about the roof over being for the roof over my head, like all on my own. Because I knew once I was on my own, once I separated, like fully separated, I was in my mind separated already while we lived in the same house. But this was, I knew I was going to find my own place, but I didn't want to have to worry about how am I going to afford it? And am I going to be able to afford therapy? So I wanted to really focus on therapy. And I did therapy for 4 years. It was 4 years of my healing journey. Okay. So impact on, so stay in unsafe situations, ignore our own needs, tolerate behavior that hurts us, even if, we don't believe we deserve it, or deserve anything better. So we tolerate that behavior that is harmful. Okay? So self-compassion, again by Kristen Neff, shows that shame reduces self-acceptance. And if it reduces self-acceptance, it reduces self-respect because those two go hand in hand. Self-acceptance first, self-respect comes from self-acceptance. Okay. And what it happens is it increases self-criticism. And when we have self-criticism, we no longer have self-compassion. Okay. So how do we build this self-respect and self-acceptance? So I'm going to start with rebuilding self-acceptance first. Again, this is, how it grows is that we notice without judgment. So we notice our emotions, we notice our thoughts without judgment, okay? And we release perfection to know it doesn't exist. And I've said this before as well. The only place the word perfection or perfect exists is that we're perfectly imperfect. It's the only place. Otherwise, it truly does not exist. It's a level that we'll never reach because it keeps moving. Okay. So, an example of how self-acceptance grows, it's when we think or say things like, I shouldn't feel this way, to instead shift to, it makes sense that I feel this way. I've been through a lot. Okay. So, how does self-respect grow? That's the setting of boundaries, which is the next, developing healthy boundaries is the next podcast next week. It's honoring our needs as well as our wants. It's saying no when needed. And if you struggle with the word no, say, I'd really like to, but I can't right now. My plate is full. Thank you for thinking of me. It's following through with yourself. So it's making those promises that you know that you'll be able to keep. Okay. You're not going to make a promise to yourself unless, you may make a promise, and let's say it's a promise about resting. And I think this is further down the line here, but maybe it's making a promise about, I'm going to rest today. I'm going to give myself an hour, at lunchtime to rest. But then you get a phone call that there's an emergency or something has happened and you don't get that rest. It's not about beating yourself up that you didn't get that rest. It is about telling yourself, I could not predict or control that this emergency happened, whether that's at work or at home with your family, whatever the case may be. Okay. So small steps can be taken for self-respect. And this is rest when you're tired. Speak up when something feels off. And sometimes self-respect is actually not speaking up if it is not safe to do so. So you may speak up when something feels off and it's safe. And another way to help self-respect is going, I don't feel safe right now, so I'm just going to keep quiet at this point in time. It doesn't mean that you'll keep quiet in an hour or the next day or whatever the case may be, but it is choosing what feels right for you in that moment. And only you know that. Okay. Um, Choosing things that aligns, choosing what aligns for you morally, ethically, your values, what feels right. Okay. So, how do these two work together? So, self-acceptance and self-respect, as I've said, are in tandem. They're connected. We can't have one without the other. Okay. So self-acceptance creates compassion and understanding. So that is the emotional component with the logical. Okay. Compassion is emotional, understanding is logical. And self-respect creates action and boundaries. So do you see why we have to have self-acceptance first? Because if we don't believe or even have compassion for self or believe we deserve, respect, then we're not going to accept respect. We're going to accept disrespect from anybody else. Okay. And the truth of the matter is, like I said, we need both. We, you know, acceptance without respect is staying stuck, and respect without acceptance, there, see, word, you know, mixing up words here. Respect without acceptance is harshness, and that's criticism. So when we think that we have respect, our actions don't speak to respect. We're harsh with ourselves. We break ourselves down. We beat ourselves up instead of building self up. So we have to have self-acceptance in order to take action. That is self-respect. Self-acceptance is the emotion, and belief in self and self-respect is the actions that follow. So in closing, if you feel disconnected from yourself, you are not alone. You are rebuilding something that is impacted, but not entirely lost, even though it feels lost. You are allowed to accept yourself. You're allowed to respect yourself. And you're allowed to grow at your pace. 3 takeaways from today is self-acceptance is about how you relate to yourself. Self-respect is how you honor yourself through actions. So the relate to self is through thought and through emotion. The self-respect is you honor yourself through actions. And both are impacted by betrayal trauma, but they can be rebuilt in tandem. So thank you. Thank you for joining me today on Beneath the Silence, Healing the Wounds of Betrayal Trauma. Remember that healing is possible, even from those deepest, darkest, most painful, cavernous wounds. And if this episode resonated with you today, please let me know. Leave a comment or send me an email, sandy@sandrajoy.ca. And I'm going to I'm asking you to please leave a comment if you will, or some suggestions for future podcasts. And I would love to know what you're thinking, what you're needing. And then I can do my research and make a podcast around that. Because if you need it or you're wanting it, you can rest assured that there's others that would need it and want it as well. If you'd like more resources or support, please visit me at sandrajoy.ca, and that's where my betrayal trauma course is. And I can't remember if I mentioned this last week, but I am planning for September. By the time that you see this podcast, the information will have been on Instagram, and I'm going to make a reel on YouTube to post as well about Beneath the Silence retreat. So right now it's September 23rd to 27th. Those are the dates that we're thinking or I'm thinking of. I do have a colleague and friend who will be coming as well to be my backup, and that way if anybody is dysregulated, whatever the case may be, just need some added support, She will be there. Her name is Wendy. She will be there for you to help with. The other is that it is going to be an all-inclusive resort in that all recreational activities other than the spa is separate to be paid for, just like if you go to a resort down south. This resort is about 40 minutes away from me, where I live in Ontario, and the resort is all inclusive, so that means your accommodations, all your meals, all the recreational activities, the workshops that we're going to do, the group support that we will do, and we have some fun activities planned as well that will be representative of the workshops and the groups that day. So we'll arrive on a Wednesday afternoon. Check-in is by 4 o'clock. We'll meet by 5 o'clock in the meeting room. And I'm going to go over the guidelines of the retreat and confidentiality, those kinds of things. And then we'll have dinner. And then you free to explore the resort and do whatever you need, for you. And then the next morning we'll start with workshops. There'll be 2 workshops for the next 3 days. So day, the second day, if you will, but first full day. So there's 2 workshops every morning for those 3 full days, and group support. So support group that we'll have for 2 hours every afternoon. And on the day we check in, and then day 2 of the full days, so day 3 or whatever, we will do an activity before dinner. But the first full day of the retreat and the third full day of the retreat, we'll do an hour activity after dinner. And again, you're going to have full control over what you participate in, what you attend. Some people may want to come to group and some people may not. Some people may want to do workshops, some people may not. But in that initial about what the retreat is all about, I'll be giving everybody a workbook that I have designed that's around the retreat and what we're going to be talking about, and just for you to be introspective. How is this going to help you? How has it been helping you? Et cetera, et cetera. Okay, so right now, looking at a price, I don't have all my quotes in, so until I get all my quotes in, I won't know the price for sure. But by the time, again, this podcast that will be etched in stone. If you have any questions, reach out to me. And so this is going to be specifically for women who have gone through betrayal trauma. And the price I'm looking at right now is between $3,500 and $3,700. I'm hope to keep it to the 3,500, and it's going to be a maximum 12 people. I'm going to try to stick around that 10 people if I can, but if there's many interested, I may go to that 12, and we'll just go from there. And again, any questions, you can go to my website. The information will be there, but also send me an email, sandy@sandrajoy.ca. There will be an application process for registering, and I just have to make sure everyone is in a space that they're not going to be highly dysregulated much of the time, because they're new to the betrayal trauma was just within a very short period of time. Their D-Day, if you will. Okay. So join me next week, or actually before we do that, please subscribe to my YouTube channel, if you will. Again, no pressure. It just ups the algorithm. I don't get paid for doing these, but it helps reach other people, so they may learn and find community and not feel so alone. So if you can subscribe to my YouTube channel, I really, really appreciate it. Like and share the podcast if you feel comfortable doing so. And then join me next week as I discuss developing healthy boundaries and after betrayal and what that might look like. And this conversation matters. Why? Because you matter. Conversation is important. Why? Because you're important. And and you know, that's the bottom line is you believing in yourself that you matter and you are important. And until next time, take gentle care of yourself. And as always, remember, I see you, I hear you, and I believe you. Until we meet again. Thank you.